Once upon a time. Welcome to Australian Book Lovers, your destination for imagination.
A big warm welcome to everybody and a huge thank you for joining us on the Australian Book Lovers podcast. Our mission is to bring fabulous Australian and Indigenous literature that spans a whole range of genres to book lovers around the globe, as well as fantastic resources and information for passionate authors looking to write their next bestseller. I'm Laurie Bell, science fiction and fantasy author, Friday fictioneer, reader, and your co-host for today for Australian Book Lovers, coming to you from Wurundjeri Wurrung country.
Excellent. Well done. Woohoo.
First start.
And I am Veronica Strachan, aka V.E. Patton, science fiction, fantasy, memoir, and picture book author and voracious reader of almost every genre you can think of, though I do have my favourites, as you may have guessed. Coming to you today as the co-host also from Wurundjeri Wurrung country in National Reconciliation Week. As part of National Reconciliation Week, we've been doing a lot of sharing about so many Indigenous people who are offering that truth-telling, but also treaty, the Victorian Treaty. A group of really, getting some runs on the board there and sharing their work slowly but gently, bringing people into better knowledge. And Rachel Perkins, who is of course a filmmaker, she's a movie and TV producer. She and Darren Dale were Blackfella Films. And I know Rachel, I think, has moved on to do her own bits and pieces now. But one of the most amazing things she did was to record, I think it took about 7 years, the Australian Wars. So it's 4 episodes, and it really lays out with information and with interviews about the wars that the British started by coming in to colonise, Australia. And Rachel is an Arrente and Kalkadoon woman, as well as having European ancestry, and she just did it so beautifully. And I'd absolutely recommend people to look on iView or SBS and to watch the Australian Wars. And again, in that spirit of truth-telling but reconciliation, and I think that's fantastic.
That is absolutely marvellous. Fantastic.
Yeah, a bit longer than I thought on the introduction, but yeah, I just remembered that because we've been doing it all week, and I thought, well, it's still this week, even though it might take me a little while to get the editing done.
Well, I thought I'd mention for today, for those that are watching on YouTube, you'll see that I am actually in my little writer's office that I have in my house. I am taking a risk with the kittens. I have 2 young 8-month-old cats that I hadn't been willing to trust with doing my recordings without being completely overwhelmed with helpers, let me put it that way, little 4-pawed helpers. But I've been training them up with my work doing my meetings. So far so good. So if you do see the occasional tail walk past, that will be why. So I'm warning everyone now. If we have a sudden room change, it's because they've gotten too unruly.
Colour and movement we'll say for the time being, which is good.
That's right. That's good. Very good.
We have an absolutely action-packed episode, as always. Sometimes I think, oh, what are we going to talk about? Now I think,
every week there's too much.
Every week there's too much. And look, we're really lucky we have Darren Kasenkow's last interview, and what a corker this is.
It really is a wonderful interview.
Yes, with the fabulous Tania Blanchard. So, and not just about her most current book, which is A Woman of Courage, but about a number of other bits and pieces. And Darren, in his beautiful, inimitable style, has some corker questions that
I absolutely loved listening to these ones. It had my brain going a mile a minute with everything that Tania and Darren were talking about.
He is and I don't say was because he's just busy doing other things. He has a fabulous kind of esoteric view, and when you read his books, even the horror, then you know, it's deep life affirming stuff that he writes about, and just bathed in blood and gore sometimes, but you know.
And of course, we will miss his lovely dulcet tones, and we will have to get him
Indeed.
back on so that he can
Yes.
chat about his writing.
Yes, and maybe we should set a date so that he can
That's a good
get his
idea.
book done and come on and talk
Yeah, we'll give him
about
a target.
Godless, which is the second of his in the Hallucigenia Project series. So yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so I'm sure there's a fair bit of editing to do because the first one was a brick, as we like to, you know, nominate in some of our stories. So yes, I'll just put that cup of tea down. Okay, so we've got an interview with Tania. You and I are chatting about way too many exciting things, but
Yes.
let's begin with the news.
All right.
Okay, I have got some news for you, and this first little lot comes from the fabulous literary listings. So literary listings, come on up here. There we go. Comes from, oh man, no, that's not what I do. Come up. There we go. Let me try that one more time. As you can see, we haven't quite got the technology right, but we think we're nearly there. Yeah. So literary listings are very helpful, and I wanted to share with you the events coming up for June and July. So Melton City Libraries, 10 to 12, have got short story workshop. There's 4 Saturday sessions by Vicky Petratus, and if anybody knows crime fiction in Australia, Vicky is the go. We've got a couple of her books on the website, and she is fabulous crime author. June 1 to 2, the Castlemaine Art Museum has got the Cam Art Book Fair. Monday, June 2nd, the Melbourne Writers Club meet at 6 p.m. with guest Jess Kitching, hey, one of our writers as well, and Bridget Orchetty, Readings Book, 6:30 p.m. Carlton, again, Monday, June the 3rd. What Readers Do by Dr. Beth Driscoll. Moonee Valley Library, 6:30 p.m. John Morrissey, Firelight. I tell you what, if you're not going to something about books on at the
There's
beginning
lots
of June,
happening in winter.
what are you doing? Yeah, in fact, absolutely. So Port Phillip Libraries have got stuff. Warrnambool Library. We love libraries.
Absolutely. Libraries are
Paperback
the
books.
best.
They
And
are the
particularly
best.
in winter. And of course,
Ah,
in Australia, we literally started winter today.
we did.
So libraries are the best place to go when it's really cold and wet outside.
Oh yes. Oh yes. Oh, look, our fabulous Kate Forsyth is in Convo. I don't know if you've ever had any courses with Kate Forsyth. She is fabulous. She's a prolific writer and a great teacher. So she's in Convo about Psyche, so that's Psykhe, which is her latest, I was going to say fractured fairy tale, but that's not right. Reimagining a fairy tale.
Yes, so some news. So we've got the wonderful Eugen Bacon has been awarded the 2024 Hedberg Writer in Residence,
Yep.
which is in Hobart, a Hobart residency, which is absolutely magnificent. So congratulations,
Fabulous. Eugen, that's
there.
great.
Excuse me,
Yes.
tail. Go that way. Thank you. I also have, let's see what other wonderful info I've got. The Text Prize 2024 shortlist has been announced.
Oh, that's good.
Which is the shortlist for the young adult and children writing worth 10,000 Australian dollars.
Nice.
So the shortlisted manuscripts are The Feathers and Firewood by Jane McIntyre, I Don't Want to Be Your Friend by Olivia Muscat, A Gift from the Birds by Carolyn Stills, Love on the Zigzag by Alison Whipp, and Happy Medium by Jessica Wu. So that's the shortlist for the Text Prize. The Australis Awards 2023 winners were announced a couple of weeks ago. So, and I was very excited to see that there were a few people that we've chatted to, or yourself and Darren have chatted to, that managed to get on the list, which is absolutely amazing. Let's see. Oh, and the Yabba Awards, the 2024 shortlists have been announced. So those are also the Young Australians Best Book Awards. So lots of YA shortlists have been coming out lately.
Yep.
There's a huge list of the shortlist selected books there, picture books, fiction for young readers, fiction for older readers, for sevens to nines. So that's very exciting. If I go through that whole list, we'll be here forever. There's also the 2024 ASA and HQ Fiction Prize announces their shortlist as well, which is for unpublished manuscripts. Where let's say Shashini Gamage, The Fright of Real Feathers, Kathleen Hastings, Hendricki, Rembrandt's Bathsheba. I'm terrible at these. Ariane James, Second Skin, Mahar McKee. I am so sorry if I've completely butchered your name there. The Shores Between, and Esme Wilmot with Parallels. So that's all very exciting.
That's good.
And I did want to have a chat about, and this might be quite interesting to you there, Veronica. The Indie Author Survey results were released.
Yes.
Now, that's
Tell me
the
more.
Alliance of Independent Authors that have released their Big Indie Author Data Drop Report, which highlights the key trends in self-publishing over the past year. So for all those self-publishers out there with your writing and your publishing, this is quite interesting if you read the results. So the survey data gathered from over 2,000 self-published authors from around the world, including the US, the UK, and Australia. And some of the interesting findings were that authors who self-publish are out-earning authors in traditional publishing.
Wow.
So I thought that was a really interesting stat.
Yeah.
So they're saying that self-published authors are reporting that their median wage was US dollars 12,759, which is a 53% increase since 2022.
Amazing.
I'd say that really shows. I mean, and again, it shows it's not a lot either. That's them out earning people, and that's not a lot of money.
That's not a lot. There isn't. No. So if you're thinking to support yourself by writing,
yes,
and
apparently, the median wage for authors who are traditionally published in the UK, US, and Canada sits between $5,000 US dollars and $8,000 US dollars.
It's not a lot.
No, and it appears to be in decline, which is also very interesting. So in Australia, the Macquarie University Author Income Survey puts Australian authors at a mean earning of $18,200. That is definitely not me.
So, that is definitely not me. And we know the ASA survey that does many Australian one. It's actually, it's pretty
and
low.
that's roughly the equivalent of the US 12,000. So
yes.
And that includes both traditionally and self-published authors. And we do know that the market in Australia is pretty tough.
Yes.
So other things that were interesting, self-publishing authors from marginalised communities earn more than their counterparts.
This is good.
Not surprising, men earn 41% more than women in traditional publishing. However, the opposite rings true in indie publishing, with women earning 40% or 40.9% more than men. So that's really interesting. There is also Gen Z are choosing to print books over digital versions.
Right.
Which is interesting knowledge for all of us young adult and middle grade writers, that Gen Z are choosing the book versions over the digital versions.
There is something about holding the book in your hand.
There's the smell of it, but also just knowing that you've
a visceral sensation of and turning the pages and looking at the words on the page. Direct.
So almost 40% of Gen Z read daily, and I hope we can get that number up, but that's still a pretty good number compared to where it was. Read daily or a few days a week, with 55% reading at least once a week. So that's some good news for future writers out there, that people are still reading, which is good. The perception of self-publishing is improving. So out of 800 authors that were surveyed to gather information about their perception of self-publishing, 93% of authors responded that they had somewhat or extremely positive perception about self-publishing, which is a good thing for the self-published out there. two last points. So the reach of Kindle Unlimited's subscription program is improving, but remuneration to authors is not keeping up. So something to keep in mind. And self-published authors are aware of AI, but are hesitant to use it in the writing process, which I am very glad to hear about.
Yes, most definitely.
Yeah. So if you want to read the full report, it's available on the asaauthors.org.au website. It's very fascinating, really interesting to get a read on where things are sitting with the publishing world. So it's a good report to read.
It's good. Excellent. I've kind of missed most literary things this last couple of weeks. But anyway, don't forget, indie authors, you are most welcome to put your books and list them with us on the Australian Book Lovers website.
Yes.
And I bet you most of you can't even tell where they come from, whether they are traditionally or indie published, because although
the quality is amazing.
Yes, the quality is brilliant. And we do thank some publishers who often will, send us free copies of the book. We also get free copies of indie books to share. And I'm just going to put up all of these.
Wow.
We've got 5 books to give away, so which is fantastic. And I'll talk about those a little bit more later when we're doing book spotlights. But I found my festival thing. And the reason that I wanted to mention it is because 7th to 10th of June is the Wood End Winter Arts Festival, which of course is just down the road from me. Nice. So this is an annual celebration showcasing the very best of classical music from Australia and internationally, along with a literary and visual arts program. And it takes place across the various venues in the village of Wood End in the Macedon Ranges, just down the road from me. But there you go. So, well, you probably missed the Capricorn Coast Writers Festival at Yeppoon in Queensland, 2nd to 4th. 7th to 9th of June, the Bellingen Writers Festival in New South Wales. 6th to 8th, Wordfest in Toowoomba in Queensland. 9th to 10th, the Logan Writers Festival in Queensland. 12 to 16, here's a nice one for us, Winter Words in Beechworth.
Ooh,
that sounds good. More than a writers' festival, 5 days of talking, listening, watching and doing, which aims to foster the celebration of words. Program details to come, but have a look at that one. The Willie Lit Fest, Williamstown in Victoria. The Outback Writers Festival in Winton, Queensland. The Northern Territory Writers Festival in Alice Springs up in Parntway. And on the 20th to July the 11th, 20th of June to July the 11th, is the Monash Word Fest. So Word Fest is Monash Council's annual literature festival, brought to you by the Monash Public Library Service again. So we started with libraries, finishing with libraries, and it brings writers and readers together for a series of author talks, writing workshops, and the Monash Short Story Competition. Now, we just do have one more.
I love that there's so many writing festivals at the moment.
Yes.
Budding authors, get onto that. That's fantastic stream of knowledge.
Absolutely. Now, I've got 2 little bookmarks for you on my not Twitter account. One is, do you remember that we had the riddle from the PMI Victoria? Well, they also do some quite funny things with the librarians. That they've actually been telling some jokes. So let me just share a couple of the library jokes. So they come up to their staff and what happened when you got lost at the sculpture gallery? The answer, I was stuck between a rococo and a hard place. When you visit the sculpture wing at the museum, how do you feel? I had a marvellous feeling. What's a museum's favourite kind of music? Classical, of course.
Of course.
Yeah. So I also wanted to mention that the lovely, generous Rachel Matthews, who we interviewed on the Writers' Room, and we will do another one very soon. I've got a couple of crime writers lining up.
Fantastic.
Rachel is also visiting the lovely Gisborne Library, which is my local library. I'm so excited. Saturday, June 29th. So come along for some raw fun. And her course, of course, is Readers Are Writers. And you heard her talk about that, where she absolutely encourages people to write stories. So that is brilliant. I hope I'm home that weekend, because I would definitely love to go. So that's Saturday, 29th of June, 10 till 12. And tickets are at Eventbrite, but I'm sure you can look on Rachel's social media and see all of that. And we'd
Fantastic.
like to have a little chat. Rachel has offered also to do one of those courses for us online and to have that live for Australian book
Oh,
lovers.
that'll be exciting.
So that will be exciting. Watch
Yes.
this space. We'll get that organised and give people a chance to book in and work out a time that's going to work for everybody else.
Wonderful.
Probably maybe a weekend or an evening. I don't know. But anyway, we'll have a chat because you and I want to come.
Yes,
First of all,
absolutely. I want I want to be bold.
All right. So that is the news.
Wonderful.
That was a lot of news today.
That was a lot of news.
So you know what? We need a couple of words to keep us happy.
Okay. I look forward to this every week. Go for it.
All right. So this is from John Koenig's Dictionary of Obscure Sorrow.
Mhm.
Gaudia civis, Gaudia civis, 2 words, a noun. A humble pulse of gratification you feel when acting as a citizen, serving on a jury, standing in line at a polling place, taking part in a debate at a town meeting, where you can actually feel the gears of democracy turning ever so slightly because you actually had a hand in it.
Oh, very nice.
So
Interesting
Gaudia
word.
civis, from the Latin Gaudia meaning joyous and civis meaning citizen. So yeah, because I know that the US politics is a little bit different from us, and John being an American, brings that there. But yeah, that's good.
That's good.
We could almost be feeling Gaudia civis in that, talking about the literary survey and
Yes.
excuse me.
Oh, bless you.
Got to sneeze. Thank you. Yes. Okay. How about this one?
All right.
Nyctous, Nyctous.
Mhm.
This might be familiar.
Okay.
An adjective, feeling quietly overjoyed to be the only one awake in the middle of the night. Sitting alone with a laptop and a cup of tea, or strolling down the centre line of an abandoned street, taking in the world like an empty theatre between productions, stripped down to a simple black box, open to be whatever you want it to be.
Oh,
Nyctous,
that's a
yeah.
great word.
Nice one, isn't it?
Nyctous. I like
Yeah.
that one. I
From
think a lot of
Nyctus
authors
cereus.
would relate to that one, I think.
Yes, it's a genus of cactus that blooms only at night and pronounced nyctus. Nyctus. Yeah, there you go.
Love it.
Yeah, I'm going to give you one more because
All
I
right,
saw
go for
I was only going to give you 2, but then I saw this on I really like
do
this.
it.
Poggled. Not like a puggle, which we, as we in
Mhm.
Australia know, is a baby
It's
echidna,
baby. Yep.
and platypus. But poggled, Poggled, is an adjective which means shocked upon looking twice at something you see every day and catching an obvious detail you never noticed before.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
That's a perfect word.
Yes,
Yep.
poggled. An old scar on your loved one's knee. A wall in your house has apparently always been purple, or a prominent building that seemed to appear in your neighbourhood overnight, which makes you wonder how much else of your world you might be missing when you're just barely there yourself.
Walked into my laundry last night. One of our floor tiles, massive crack through the middle. I have never noticed it before.
You were
And I
poggled.
pointed it out to my partner, and we've both gone, when did that happen? No idea. It was
No
just,
idea.
we walk past it every single day, walk over it every single day, but it wasn't
you
until
go.
that moment we both went, oh,
So you were poggled.
yep,
Yeah.
it's a good word.
Which is from the Macedonian, and then it's written in Macedonian letter, so I can't pronounce that, but it means a glimpse. So I really love that.
Oh, that's
So we've got
fantastic.
Gaudia civis for being a citizen.
Involved.
We've got
Yep.
nyctous for being the only one awake in the middle of the night, and poggled for looking twice at something and realizing you've missed an obvious detail. So thank you so much to John Koenig. I mean, what a joy to be able to have a book full of fabulous.
That's a brilliant book.
Yeah, it is a brilliant book. I really love it.
Yeah.
It's good stuff. Oh, your friends are hunting.
They're not hunting, as opposed to, I think I'm getting the opinion on my writing, because one is currently chewing up a edited page. Ouch! That's hurtful feedback.
That's not good.
That's rather hurtful.
Yeah. Oh.
Fortunately, it's a page I've already edited, and it's covered in something. Really? Wow, that's hurtful.
Tricky. The only thing to do is to talk about book spotlights, I think.
Yes. first book spotlight for today is Edward's Cat. Three cats, speaking of cats,
Speaking
Three
of
Cats,
cats,
A Magical Legacy and a Dog by Maria P. Frino. Let me get
we
that
love
correct.
Maria.
Yes, we do love Maria. She's one of our avid
Our regulars.
Avid
Yes.
regulars, yes.
Yes.
Which is YA fantasy. So in this book, the final book of the Edward's Cat trilogy, the bullies, Donovan and Parker, join a gang and wreak more havoc, even though they were warned by Edward, putting a paralyzing spell on them, showing their awful future if they kept on this path. Logan and Jack, along with Chloe and their other geek friends, fend off these bullies as best they can. They want to rid their school of bullies. When Donovan and Parker begin targeting them outside of school, ramping up their vendetta, things take an awful turn. Logan negotiates secondary school with bullies, taunting him and his friends. Along with Jack and Chloe, who are able to shapeshift like Logan, they terrorize the bullies right back in their animal forms. But it's not easy to rely on two cats and a dog to rid Glendale of bullies. This is when Edward and Noel, Logan's and Jack's fathers, are brought in to help out. Logan and his friends grow up in this third book and negotiate life outside of school. Sorry, I'll just move that so I can see that a bit better. No, I can't. The A Alliance and the other magical society friends are asked to assist in the fight against bullies. They do, but this causes issues with their secret, the fact that they are magicals, almost exposed. This is a huge problem because the magicals have been a secret society for thousands of years. This magical realism story is for young adult readers from 13 years of age up to adults who enjoy stories that involve magic, relationships, and drama. The first book is Edward's coming-of-age story, showing how grief can be debilitating, but with time, life can return to some semblance of normal. Edward uses his magical power for good, making good friends along the way, while becoming the person he wanted to be. How good does that
Fantastic.
sound?
And I feel like it's almost no time, but I'm sure that it's been a couple of years since Maria put all these together, because I'm pretty sure her first one came out just a little while after we started Australian Book Lovers. So Maria P. Frino, her career is in using words to communicate, and as a freelance writer, she's written and edited PR, ads, corporate communications, and newsletters for products from food to jewellery, fashion and interiors, as well as garden and building products. When she's not writing corporate communications or as a senior reviewer for the online site Weekend Notes, she works on her self-published fiction books. So her first published story, The Studio, is a short crime story. Xenia Station, A Billion Light Years, is her second short story. Both are available as ebooks wherever books are sold online. And of course, they're on Australian Book Lovers pages, the various ones. The Decision They Made is her debut novel, and her other books are available on her website, which is www.mariapfrino.com. Weaving Words, an anthology she collaborated on, is also available as an audiobook. She contributed 2 short stories to this anthology, along with 8 other authors. Again, this one is also on Australian Book Lovers. She's open to collaborations with fellow authors and artists, and a tremendous contributor to the writing community, Maria. So you can follow her on X, which used to be Twitter, Instagram, Threads, and Facebook. And as mentioned, she's happy to collaborate with other creatives, writing, editing, publishing, or podcasts. She's been interviewed on a few podcasts, including this one, and have interviewed authors as well. She's happy to discuss book publishing, writing, and collaborations with you. Recently, with other authors, she set up Sydney Authors Inc., a collective of self-published authors who do free book talks in Sydney. We discuss books, reading, publishing, and all book-related topics, and we've introduced an interview format where Sydney Authors Inc. is in conversation with an author, traditional or self-published. We have authors interested in being interviewed, and these talks are currently held at the Little Big House in Summerhill, which is a beautiful space where events like ours are held regularly. Anyone is welcome to attend, and look out for tickets on Humanitix. And somebody that you know, Laurie, might in fact be going up there in August. So there you go. Going out to visit my niece in Sydney, and yes, time that with a chat with Maria and Conchita at the Little Big House in Summerhill.
Wonderful. We'll look
Yes.
forward to some feedback from all the chatting.
Yes, yes. Because I love a chat.
Sisters of the Sands by J.B. Villinger. So here we go. So once a child soldier of the female dominion, Sackett left that life behind long ago. Now free from the brainwashing, Sackett would rather stay on the move with her adopted brother Eno, doing her best to forget her past. When superpowered soldiers will stop at nothing to see them both caught, it becomes clear they won't be able to run forever. As the past threatens to enslave them, Sackett faces a grave choice. Will she risk both their lives to fight back, or serve her old masters once more to keep Eno safe?
Sisters of the Sand, so book 1 of the Acolyte series. All right, and inhabiting the Australian thoroughbred horse-loving town of Melton, again, just down the road from me, J.B. Villinger is not your typical school teacher. By day, he's moulding young students into IT super soldiers, teaching them the fine art of crafting video games that don't suck, the flashy widgety of Photoshop, the flashy widgetry of Photoshop, and the tedium of coding. But by night, he obsessively thinks about his unwritten stories and characters instead of, sleeping. He sounds like he would be a
Nyctous.
good teacher.
Nyctous.
Nyctous, indeed. Fabulous. Nice. He's experiencing nyctous.
Yep.
Perfect. So we've now used it in a sentence, so we're good with that.
We are good.
We just need to do poggled and...
oh, no, we did poggled.
We did.
Yes,
you
because I poggled.
Fantastic. So when he's not rewriting a chapter for the 67th time, we are with you, James.
Oh, yes.
James can be found staring at his ever-growing collection of video games, wondering if he'll ever have time to play them all. The answer is no, but he likes to dream. Board games, D&D, comics and anime. Is there anything he doesn't like? Yes. Cauliflower. Well, I don't know, James. I'm a little bit sad about that because I was going to make some cauliflower and bean soup for lunch. But anyway.
Nice.
He particularly likes lying games, although his poker face is about as unreadable as a children's bathtub book. Nice. James often thinks about the meaning of life, his purpose and his legacy. What will he leave behind on this world for his young son Theodore? That's why he proudly tells his tales, whether you choose to buy them or not. I am content with my creations. Isn't that a lovely bio?
That is a lovely bio. It's quite amusing.
Yeah.
I would love to have that kind of joy in my bio.
Yes, that
Make
kind of
people laugh.
self-deprecating. Yeah, what the heck? It's good. It's good.
Oh, fantastic.
All right.
Well, the next book on our
Yes.
list is The Painting by Alison Booth, which is a mystery. When Annika Molnar flees her home country of Hungary not long before the breakup of the Soviet Union, she carries only a small suitcase and a beautiful and much-loved painting of an auburn-haired woman in a cobalt blue dress from her family's hidden collection. Arriving in Australia, Annika moves in with her aunt in Sydney, and the painting hangs in pride of place in her bedroom. But one day it is stolen in what appears to be a carefully planned theft, and Annika's carefree life takes a more ominous turn. Sinister secrets from her family's past and Hungary's fraught history cast suspicion over the painting's provenance, and she embarks on a gripping quest to uncover the truth. Hungary's war-torn past contrasts sharply with Australia's bright new world of opportunity in this moving and compelling mystery. Ooh. And I'm actually going to read the next book because our second book is also by Alison Booth. So I'll read that one before you go through the lovely Alison's bio.
Mm-hmm.
The Philosopher's Daughter by Alison Booth, which is a thriller. A tale of two very different sisters whose 1890s voyage from London into remote outback Australia becomes a journey of self-discovery, set against a landscape of wild beauty and savage dispossession. London in 1891, Harriet Cameron is a talented young artist whose mother died when she was barely 5. She and her beloved sister Sarah were brought up by their father, radical thinker James Cameron. After adventurer Harry Vincent arrives on the scene, the sisters' lives are changed forever. Sarah, the beauty of the family, marries Henry and embarks on a voyage to Australia. Harriet, intensely missing Sarah, must decide on whether to help her father with his life's work or to devote herself to painting. When James Cameron dies unexpectedly, Harriet is overwhelmed by grief. Seeking distraction, she follows Sarah to Australia and afterwards into the outback, where she is alienated by the casual violence and great injustices of outback life. Her rejuvenation begins with her friendship with an Aboriginal stockman and her growing love for the landscape. But this fragile happiness is soon threatened by murders at a nearby cattle station and by a menacing station hand who is seeking revenge. That sounds good.
Yes. So, in fact, Alison is the author of 7 novels and has contributed short stories to international collections. Her debut novel, Stillwater Creek, was highly commended in the 2011 ACT Book of the Year Award. A Perfect Marriage was highly commended in the 2019 ACT Writing and Publishing Awards, and The Philosopher's Daughters was highly commended in the 2022 ACT Notables Awards. So, interesting to know that the ACT maybe has changed their name of their awards, but yeah, she's been a steady contributor and recognised for her excellence, which is good. Now, Alison is an academic at the Australian National University and a fellow of the Academy of Social Sciences in Australia. So another person who, teacher by day and and writer. Nyctous. For information, you can visit her fiction website at Alison Booth, ALISON, just one, BOOTH20.net. And of course, you can listen to Alison chat about her work on podcast episode number 103.
There you go.
So yeah, we had a lovely chat with Alison. She was amazing to have a listen to. So many clever people, just their minds full of stories that just have to get them out. And the things that they draw from their experience into stories, which is brilliant. Yeah. Good. And so Alison's books are, of course, she put the rest of her books up there, hence why she's got, because we had Bellevue, we talked to her about Bellevue, which is the one about the Blue Mountains, which was fantastic. Now, I just wanted to share the books that we have in our next giveaway, because I've just finished posting off To the River and The Rewilding and The White Cockatoo Flowers. And I've got a couple of books now from Spinifex Press. So Spinifex is an award-winning independent feminist press publishing innovative and controversial feminist books with an optimistic edge. So I have got The Leaves by Jacqueline Rule. And I'll put these up, so I shouldn't actually hold them up, because you know what? I'll put up the covers. The Leaves by Jacqueline Rule, The Rust Red Land, which is fabulous, and we'll spotlight them when their time comes, which will be in a couple of episodes, because we've still got a few to go. I've got The Changing Room by Belinda Cranston, and we spotlighted that, I think, last week or the week before. And I've got 2 copies from the lovely Bruce Lowry, who has given us Catch the Wind, From the Nullarbor to the Far Northwest in 68, and I'm pretty sure that we spotlighted that one last episode, so that's good. So 5 books to give away. If you want to get your little beady mitts on those books, please subscribe. You can go to australianbooklovers.com/booklovers, put your name down there, and that means you are in the spin for that. You'll get the newsletter when I get around to putting it together, and then you can just shoot me an email and say this is the book that you'd love to be in the spin for. And I do get some fantastic responses. It just, and you know what, I am sure that she won't mind me actually sharing. I'll check with her first, but next time I'll put in, I asked somebody about, I think one of the questions was, tell us about a memorable moment, and it was just the most wonderful, memorable moment. But yeah, I'll ask if that's all right for us to share, and we can do that on the next episode.
Great. Fantastic.
Free books, book spotlights.
So
it's
many
all about
wonderful
books.
spotlighted books this week.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Time to jump into our interview, I think.
I'm looking forward to this one with Tania, and of course listening to the lovely Darren with his last interview, which is definitely a touching and sad moment to no longer hear Darren, but we will definitely have to get him in to chat to us.
Yeah, we definitely
could be a disaster. We'll talk forever.
Well, it could be. Perhaps I'll have to do one at a time. All right, that's lovely. Thank you. Here we are with our interview with Tania Blanchard.
Ladies and gentlemen, my very special guest is the best-selling historical fiction author of titles that include The Girl from Munich, Suitcase of Dreams, Letters from Berlin, Echoes of War, Daughter of Calabria, and her latest release blockbuster, A Woman of Courage. Now, her works are inspired by true events, and her stories are described as exploring love, loss, hope, and the challenges facing women in defining moments in history. A qualified physiotherapist, champion taxi driver for her children, self-confessed, I do believe, and a lover of culinary magic in the kitchen, Tania Blanchard, welcome to the Australian Book Lovers podcast.
Oh, thanks so much, Darren. What a lovely introduction.
Whoa, what a lot of books there to describe. This is amazing. So, which puts me in a tough position because I don't know where to begin. So I'm going to begin with something that I read in your bio. And you mentioned that, you know, although you dreamed of being a writer as a child, you didn't actually embark on the journey until you had children of your own. So bearing that in mind, how does one transition from being a mother and physiotherapist to a best-selling author? Was that a conscious shift, or did the universe gently tug you in that direction? How did it come about?
Yeah, look, as you've mentioned, I've always wanted to write, and I loved writing as a child. And look, did physiotherapy because I thought, you know, that was the best kind of work options for me, that I'd be able to make a living out of being a physio, not necessarily as a writer. But when I had my children, I started writing stories for them, and I really loved being able to get back into writing. And I thought to myself, why did I ever stop this? And then I thought, I wonder if I can do something more with this, make it a career or an occupation. And then I started doing more writing, and I felt it deep in my bones that I really, really wanted to pursue this, and did some courses with the AWC and Fiona McIntosh's commercial fiction masterclass, which is where I pitched to a publisher for the very first time. I'd actually written a young adult fantasy novel, which originally morphed from writing for my daughter when she was little. It was a chapter book, and then it morphed into this young adult fantasy. And Fiona said, look, I don't know that, you know, you're going to get picked up as a fantasy author here in Australia. It's not really a done thing. Is there something else you want to write? And I said, well, my grandmother's passed away just recently, and I grew up listening to her stories of her youth in Germany during World War II. And she's left all of these photos and memorabilia and all sorts of wonderful, you know, treasure trove of information. And I told her a little bit about it. She goes, oh my God, you need to go away and write that. So I actually pitched that novel to the publishers that very same weekend. And that pretty well started my journey. And I thought, okay, right, I feel like this is a possibility for me now. And I went away and wrote it. And I was so lucky to be picked up by a publisher.
Yeah, absolutely lucky. But obviously it's not just luck. It comes down to, you know, magnificent storytelling and writing. But isn't it just it's something that I'm learning more and more, especially as I have the pleasure of interviewing authors such as yourself, and obviously as getting older and sort of looking back. But isn't it the case that sometimes our grandparents or elderly members of our family, they can have the most amazing stories? And, you know, I understand your mother's side is German, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So my grandma, one of my grandma, obviously I had two, but my mother's mum was actually Dutch, but lived in Germany for a bit. And now she didn't talk much about some of her experiences, but she did tell me one story when during World War II, when the soldiers were being marching some prisoners, and down a courtyard below her window, and she was trying to throw bread down to them because she felt so bad and was getting in trouble. That was probably the only thing she mentioned, but just there, that's just such a vivid image already. Yeah. So it must have been quite astounding to be in a position to have those stories elaborated on for yourself.
Yeah. Absolutely. And you're right. They do really evoke such vivid, you know, pictures in your own mind as to what that scene might have looked like, or because they'll tell you a little bit about, you know, how they felt about it, so you get a little bit of an insight into what was going on. But then, obviously I had a few of those fantastic stories that my grandmother told me. And then obviously backing it up with her photos and her letters and the documents she had, and then doing further research again and collaborating all of that, all of the stories and the information she had, and understanding the bigger arc, like the history behind the stories, really what was happening to them in their lives at that particular time, and just meshing those together. That's what I found really, really fascinating to be able to do.
Yeah, and I can imagine it must have been really cool in the sense of, I mean, because so many of us, myself included, when we think back to moments back in time, whether it be, the 40s, 50s, whether it be the 19th century, 18th century, we imagine as though, I guess, they're old figures back in time.
Yeah.
But we don't tend to look at it through the lens of our own eyes and imagine if we were in that circumstance. It's more just, we're just an observer of something that no longer exists. But I suspect that for yourself, that must have been a really interesting and probably very moving experience to really basically put yourself in those times and in those stories and actually look at it and live it rather than just observe it from a distance.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And when I wrote The Girl from Munich, I've just felt immediately so much closer to my grandmother. I was really close to her anyway.
Mm-hmm.
She was 91 when she passed away, but I could see through her eyes and imagine what she might have gone through, and really got a much better understanding. And I think that's what I love the most about writing the stories I write, because they're all based on family stories, is I try and put myself into the shoes of those ancestors, all those characters, and see through their eyes and get a different perspective on life, I suppose. I know with my grandmother's stories, they were told through the eyes of a young German woman living in Germany during World War II. So it was a really, really different perspective that I grew up with about World War II and the war, and how German people were victims as well, compared to the usual war stories that we read or learn about, in which is the Allied perspective. And, you can find different perspectives in all the stories, and if you put yourself into someone else's shoes, I think.
Yeah, you couldn't have said it more beautifully, and that's just one of the biggest problems, isn't it? And look, without going into today's issues, but today obviously there is a, well, there's not good news all around the world, obviously. But isn't it funny how as a general rule, it seems that from a society perspective, we tend to feel the need to pick a side or assume one side is right and one side is wrong. But it's never that clear cut. And the worst part is, I think, especially when it comes to World War I and World War II, I always think, how different would we look at it if we call it Government War I and Government War II?
I love that.
Yeah, because
that's a great way of looking at it, actually. Yeah, it's not about the ordinary people, is it?
No, because at the end of the day, the ordinary people are victims to whatever the government of the time wants to do. I mean, especially if you're faced with a situation of fight or potentially, being incarcerated or worse, in times of chaos, there's not many options on the table, especially if you want to try and survive, so with the hope that you can continue your family after. But yeah, it's a case of it's human stories in this hellish circumstances, and there never is a right or wrong, really.
No, absolutely right. And I think what I've also found, that there's just so many different points of view to a particular point in time, say World War II, because that's the one I've written about the most. I could look at the German perspective, from an ordinary person's point of view. I could look at, someone in the military as well. Why were they there to start with? What drove them to being in the military? Why did they stay? Then, of course, with Daughter of Calabria and Echoes of War, I wrote about the Italian point of view in World War II as well, from their perspective, which I didn't know very much about at all. And that was a very, very different experience to the German experience, even though they weren't on the Allied side either. So that was really fascinating. And I've recently read another book by Ali Parker, At the Foot of the Cherry Tree, which is based on her grandmother's story. So her grandmother was the first Japanese war bride here in Australia, and the experience that her grandparents went through at the end of the war as well, also not looked on very kindly by Australian citizens. And see, that's another part of the war story that I didn't know much about. So there's lots of these different perspectives that make up the whole, and that gives us a better sense of the truth, I suppose.
Yeah, that's right, because it's the sum of the parts that make the whole, isn't it? And you know, and especially too bad if the whole has lots of sides and you can only see one or two sides from a distance, even though, like you said, there's just so many different experiences. And look, it's just, again, I always just think of it as a human story. And wow, you've definitely, you know, chosen an amazing sort of, well, I guess, setting or timeframes for your books. But before we go into a little bit more about your books, and of course your latest book, which is what we're all here for, I was curious. I mean, you said you started writing for your kids, which means, I'm guessing that means that they were actually good little practice as far as working with an editor and a publisher, because I'm assuming they gave you like descriptions of what they wanted to read.
Yeah, absolutely. So for my daughter, it was about crystals and princesses and animals, and it was a real fantasy landscape for her. And as I say, her story morphed from being a chapter book. She must have been like year 3 or 4, I suppose, when I was writing that, all the way through to high school. So it became this young adult novel, and she's read 3 or 4 incarnations of this book, and you know, yeah, she gave me a bit of good feedback at the time as well, but yeah, she was always incredibly supportive. She's my oldest, and then I started writing for the boys who were much younger, boys' stories, but never really finished those off, because that's when my journey changed to writing historical fiction.
Well, what a treasure for your daughter to have a book written by her mum. That's
Yeah.
yeah, that's a definite treasure. But I am curious. So, you know, obviously you dreamed of being a writer as a child. Can you remember back then when you sort of first, you know, as a little child, thinking you might want to be a writer one day, or might want to be a writer straight away? Before all of the historical fiction and the stories from your grandmother and other family members came, do you remember as a little girl what type of writing you thought you'd be writing?
Yeah, I think fantasy back then. Yeah, it was fantasy. That's what I loved reading the most. My favourite book when I was, say, about 11 years old, I think I was like in year 6, was The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe.
Of course.
And that just introduced me to this fabulous fantasy world of Narnia. But what I loved even more about it was that it also juxtaposed the real world, like it was during World War II, and these kids, you know, escaped through the wardrobe. And so I loved the sense of reality against the fantasy world as well, and how it can just so immerse you into a story. And I thought, yeah, this was what I would really love to write one day, something that can make you feel so that can really change the way you feel about writing and reading so powerfully, I suppose.
Oh, as a child, and I like to think as an adult, but a book like that was just this magical portal, wasn't it? And
Yeah.
I know it was a bit of a side sort of swipe, should I say, side story here. But you know, like I love going to a new bookshop. Obviously I buy a lot of books online as well, digitally and stuff. But you know, I do love a good secondhand shop. And I was at, of all things, a gem show the other day, but one of the stalls was actually raising funds, and they had, you know, piles and piles of secondhand books. But there was something about seeing these dog-eared titles from the late 70s, early 80s that were there. It just brought back all those memories of, you know, sitting in my bedroom and just being mesmerized by a book and knowing what would happen when I opened it. And I'm hoping to recapture that as an adult. I still get excited, but but just that when you're a kid.
It was really special. Yeah, absolutely. And like, you know, I read stories like The Magic Faraway Tree and started writing little stories based on those kind of characters as well, and little poems and things, and started writing around, you know, that kind of world. And that was amazing to me as well, that it just takes you straight back. And I was really lucky to grow up with childhood books that my mum had as well. So there was, I'm trying to think now, Black Beauty and My Friend Flicker, and there are all sorts of fantastic things. And already then I knew that mum had read them, and maybe some other people as well. There's nothing better than the feel of a secondhand book just knowing that it's had a history as well, I guess. Who's read it, what did they think about it, and that knowing that they were well loved volumes as well, and that you are the next person to read it and then perhaps hand it on to someone else who will also love it.
Well, it's all about the passing of the magic spell, isn't it?
Yeah, you're right.
The book is just that magic spell going from hand to hand, and look, I love all technology, but I stand by my thought that a book is still far more magical than flicking on a show on Netflix. So,
because you can imagine it. I mean, whatever you want to imagine in your own mind, it's there. So it's all within you.
Absolutely. And hey, look, it's 2023 and there is nothing stopping books. So that's the best part of all. But of course, fantasy is maybe something you'll be touching upon down the track. But of course, historical fiction is your literary world right now. And so one of the indisputable facts I do believe about historical fiction is the need to research, which is something you've touched on already. So I have to ask, when you sort of began the whole process, was it a case that you found the task a steep learning curve, or was it like an instant passion, an instant friend that just opened doorways to rich stories? And so, that research was really just you being swept away.
Yeah. Oh, look, I've always loved research. I've always loved history. That's another thing I've been really fortunate to be able to enjoy. And so research for me was fascinating. Like, I just couldn't wait to dive into these new worlds, particularly this latest one with the Victorian era, all the fascinating change. And it was really just before the modern age began at the turn of the 20th century. So I knew there'd be so many fascinating things to explore. So research has always been really, really important to me, and often I spend way too much time researching. You sort of get carried away down this rabbit hole of this fascinating information, some that you're going to use, but most that you really aren't. But I guess at the end of the day, it sets you up to understand what the world was like at the time, and that kind of really informs the way that you're going to write your story, regardless of how much detail you put in it.
I guess it's a case of just becoming familiar with the world. You're not going to describe the whole world when you get to write, but just knowing the world that you're going to be exploring your story in is going to give it more gravitas when you actually begin your plot and introduce your characters. Now, I understand that, and I think you mentioned this anyway, that prior to writing your first novel, which you just mentioned, The Girl from Munich, but you did say you attended Fiona McIntosh's commercial fiction masterclass. Yeah. So I was just wondering, maybe for writers listening to the show, are you able to maybe share some insights or writing tools that you learned that may have come as a surprise, something that you wouldn't have expected, and that your writing has benefited from?
Yeah, I think something that I learned when I was at Fiona's class was the idea that you write to a word limit each day or per week, so that you can actually get to the end of your first draft. And this is kind of the real practical, hands-on stuff that you don't always hear. So that was really useful to me. And the other thing, of course, that the really important thing for me was to actually finish the first draft. Don't go back and edit or change things, as I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so I have a tendency to want to go back and perfect that scene or rewrite that character or whatever it is. I think what I learned is that you write all the way through to the very end, so that you've got a finished copy, and then you can go back and make those changes. It's like layering. You got the base story, and then you layer all sorts of things in that second draft.
And was there anything else that popped out that you never would have thought prior to the course of applying to your writing style?
Basically, I think that you've got to treat, if you want to be a writer, a published writer, you've got to treat it like a business as well. So it means sitting down, 4 or 5 days a week and treating it like a job. So you have to actually be really disciplined with your writing as well, which I kind of did know, but that really gave me much better insight into being a lot more disciplined and structured with the way that I worked.
Oh, I wish I could pop into Woolies and get a bottle of extra strong discipline. That's for sure. I have spurts, but sometimes it gets a little bit tricky. But it obviously is definitely something that's working for you, because you've got, this amazing library of work behind you already, with, probably a whole lot more titles coming. But now, with regards to your works, they are described as being about love, loss, hope, and the challenges women faced in defining moments in history. So for all of our book loving listeners out there, do you think you could take a moment to just give a really brief insight into what each book is about?
Oh, yeah, sure. So The Girl from Munich is based in World War II, and it's based on my grandmother's stories as a young woman. And she's a young woman who becomes a photographer and wants to fight on the front. And through the process of the story, she becomes disillusioned by what's happening in Germany with Hitler's regime, and finds out the truth of what's happening. So for her, it's a real coming of age story.
Mm-hmm.
Suitcase of Dreams follows on from the character Lottie, her story, as she comes to Australia with her family, and she becomes a new Australian in the 1950s. And all of the challenges that came with that, a lot of unknowns. They came to Australia expecting to be able to work in their occupations, and they ended up in a migrant camp. So that was a real fight to find their roots and to find their sense of belonging and identity here in Australia. So that was A Suitcase of Dreams. Letters from Berlin, that was inspired by a letter from my grandmother's cousin that I found in her belongings. And he was half Jewish and half German. So his story was really fascinating. So it follows basically what happened to those Jewish people of mixed blood, so half German and half Jewish, during World War II. They weren't persecuted the same way as full Jewish people sort of earlier in the war, but certainly later on through the war, things became very, very dangerous for them. And also towards the end of the story, we get the Russian influence as well, and how they came in and expropriated property from the eastern part of Germany, and how that affected ordinary families as well. So that's that one. Echoes of War and Daughter of Calabria are the same book that have been published under two different titles and covers. So this one was based on my father's family stories. He's from Calabria originally. He came out when he was 10 years old with his family. So I looked at what it might have been like for my grandparents during World War II, and the experience they might have had in a tiny village right on the tip of the toe of Italy. And also there were lots of wars at that time as well. So showing the Italian perspective of war. And Julia's a wonderful character. She's a healer and a folk healer, and she wants to make a difference to all of her countrymen, even though the country's split in civil war. So that's that one. And A Woman of Courage is my latest book, where I've turned to my husband's family stories this time. And his family came from northern England, so the area called Durham. That's the county of Durham in northern England. And his family owned a pub around the turn of the 20th century. So the story is based around the character of Hannah, and her father has just bought a pub in a small country village. And she's come out of Teachers College, ready to change the world and make a difference to women and children's lives. And she has to learn to navigate her way through this tiny village and help the people there, and then become involved in the national suffrage movement as well, which is something she's passionate about. So yeah, you're right. All of my stories do look at, love, loss, hope, and the struggles that women have, at any point in time in history. They're always been sort of disempowered, I suppose, in some way or other. And yet, despite their difficulties and their challenges in their lives, they still find a way to rise to the surface with, love and hope and joy. And that's kind of what I really find inspiring with these women in my stories.
And may I ask, when it comes to, all the books you've written, and the fact that, the basic theme, or should I say the essential theme, is women facing defining moments in history, was that a conscious decision that that would be your motif for a lot of the stories, or was it something that just evolved from the stories that you were learning about and researching?
Yeah, no, that it wasn't a conscious decision, actually. My grandmother's story was the very first story, and that was always in my mind growing up with her stories. And she was always a really larger than life character. So I suppose it kind of naturally follows. But I guess when I've been looking for potential stories, or I'm really a real lover of researching family history and family heritage, and looking at family trees. And when I've been going through this process, there'll be occasionally an ancestor that pops up, and it's always a woman, because her stories are usually really unknown. They're not told, or only partly told, and there's not a lot of information on the women. And I kind of always have wondered, what would your life have been like at the time? We know a lot more about what the men's lives were like at the time through extra documents or the way history's been told, but we don't know a lot about the women's stories. And that's kind of, I guess, the trigger for writing each of my stories. I do find this fascinating and intriguing woman in one of the family trees and go, right, you really intrigue me. I want to know more about your story. And it starts from there.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I mean, it must have been quite interesting to, when you were giving a few of the descriptions there, I was trying to imagine, having been born obviously here in Australia, I couldn't imagine what Australia would look like if you were arriving on the first time, in the midst of war, or at the midst of just the end of World War II, to come to this country and be in a migrant camp, and while the world's still trying to settle and things are still very much on eggshells. It must have been really interesting trying to find out about Australia back then, and what it must have looked like through the eyes of somebody, leaving a war-torn country to come here.
Yeah, look, I was so fortunate to have some of those stories as well from my grandmother. But I mean, I was able to also talk to my parents' and grandparents' friends, most of them sort of children the same generation as my parents, about their experiences as well when they came to Australia. But the best thing of all, I could not believe when I found this journal that my grandfather had written.
Oh, wow.
On the boat coming to Australia, and in maybe the first 6 or 9 months that they were in the migrant camps here in Australia.
Oh, it's like he knew what you'd be doing in the future.
Absolutely. Oh, it's amazing. And look, it was all in German, but it was typed, so I could go into Google Translate, thank God, and translate it. And it wasn't just like we did this and this and this. It was how he felt about what he was going through at the time. And the experiences that he had, how it might have impacted on his family. I think he wrote something fascinating about he'd come to Sydney, he'd been in the Bonegilla migrant camp, so that's on the near Albury, between New South Wales and Victoria there. And he came to Sydney for the very first time, and he wrote that he walked down the street and people were dressed really casually, and he found that such a surprise. But the city was clean and quiet, and just all of these wonderful perceptions that he had. And it just it was wonderful just listening or reading all of this about him, and getting a real sense of the man and what it might have been like for a migrant to come to Australia at this time.
Yeah, wow, that is absolutely amazing to be able to have a journal, literally a portal back to that time, and like you said, with the descriptions of the emotions and thoughts.
Made my life a lot easier, I have to say.
I remember my father-in-law, so my wife's Japanese, and her father worked for, he was an engineer for Mitsubishi, but when he was very young, his first trip to Australia, they were delivering a ship to Darwin, but it wasn't, it was still a bit not far from the war, and he said he was so excited about finally visiting Australia, and within about 10 minutes of sort of getting off and walking around, he got punched. So, of course, because there was still a lot of, but there, and yet, you know, that's such a, I was like, oh, that's not the best way to learn about our country. But of course, he ended up going to America and working with NASA and the space shuttle and all this stuff. And to think that, a man who's launched, you know, spacecraft into orbit got punched here in Darwin. But it must have been, and like you said too, with the ability to go back in time, where the new world was just beginning. You know, it's just such a romantic sort of idea of when electricity was just coming in, and you know the industrial was slowly coming in, and you're losing the shackles of the period before that crisscross time. Must be a fascinating time, and to be honest, I don't know too much about it, but it sounds like you might have done a fair bit of research for that for A Woman of Courage.
Oh, I really did. And that was the beautiful thing about researching this time. So this is the late Victorian era, sort of around the 1890s. And it was just coming up to the 20th century, and that was when the modern age was beginning. You had sort of amazing advances in medicine and technology and science. Public health and sanitation had really improved drastically. There are all sorts of social reforms as well at the time. Vaccinations for the smallpox disease was a national program rolled out across Britain, which made a difference worldwide to eradicating the disease midway in the 20th century. So there were all of these cutting edge and there's new ideas as well, progressive ideas about egalitarianism, that all people are equal, and it led to socialism and the cooperative movement and trade unionism, and that led to the whole political landscape of the time and really pushing the boundaries of what people were ready to believe and to accept, which I guess is some of the tension within the story as well, that people are still quite resistant to these new things. It was great. I could wax lyrical for ages about all of the wonderful research.
Well, there seem to have been such momentous shifts in like you said, in just life overall, like what it meant to be in a society, the direction society was taking, the direction technology is taking, you know, those horizons that were looming of what the results of the new technology would be. I mean, so I've grown up, the internet's come, which has been pretty exciting. But I've had electricity since I was born. There's been television since I was born. Nothing's really changed. Just the way we watch TV is different. The way I listen to music's different. Still no different in the sense of the medium's different, but the result's the same. It would have been amazing to be back then. Although, hand on heart, having as someone who's had couple of surgeries, I don't think I'd like to have been involved in any surgical procedures back then.
Things were still a bit dodgy, I have to say, back then for a lot of those things.
That may be the right word for it, dodgy,
I know that when I was doing research between the differences between, say, the big cities, Hannah in the story was born in the big port city, industrial port city of Hartlepool, and she goes to this small agricultural village, kind of this little bubble surrounded by coalfields. So it's kind of almost still transported in the previous century. And so it was fascinating to discover that while the cities had gas lighting in the streets and in the homes, they had water reservoirs actually running water down to the streets and to the cities. In the villages, like this one, they had no gas, and there was electricity actually in London as well, in some of the parts of London. In the street lighting and also in the theatres and that sort of thing. But in a small town like this, there was none of that. It really was just such a big difference. They had oil lanterns. They had no street lighting. They had wells that they used, communal wells around the village that they pulled water from and carted water to the buildings and to the homes. So there was that real contrast. So that was really, really fascinating to write about, and you really could get into the grittiness of how times were and then how that kind of evolved into all the progress and the change of that fantastic era.
And you said that this particular book, A Woman of Courage, is actually based on stories of your husband's side of the family. Was there a particular person that was the inspiration for Hannah Todd, or was it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep, there certainly was. Again, another family member. So I first heard this story about the Blanchards owning a pub in Durham, England, from my father-in-law many years ago, and then his cousin who lives in Durham also told me the similar story. So I was fascinated to hear about this publican who ran this pub and his wife. Most of all about his wife, what would her life have been like as the wife of a publican? I was quite taken by her story, and so I did a bit of research on the Ancestry website, did the family tree, and found out a little bit more about her story. And I found this census document in 1891. So her name was Eleanor Blanchard. And I discovered that she was in this census document living with her parents at the very same pub that her and her husband later on managed and ran. And I also discovered that she was also a school teacher. So I thought, oh my goodness, how did she become a school teacher coming from, I knew that she'd been born in this big industrial port city, the daughter of an engine fitter. So it was fairly working class. How did she become a teacher? And how did she go from that, or how did they end up even being in a pub at all? And then going from that to running a pub with her husband some years later. So that was the inspiration for my story. I just couldn't get her out of my head, and I wanted to know more about what her life might have been like.
Well, I understand that when Hannah Todd joins a family in rural village, that ultimately she will need to discover how far she's willing to go when it comes to fighting for what's right. So a question I have for you is, what does the word courage mean to you, and how far would you go to fight for what's right?
Yeah, and certainly they were the questions I was definitely thinking about while I was writing the story, and the word courage kept coming up. While I was writing Hannah's story, I knew then what my title had to be, A Woman of Courage, because the women in my story were all being very courageous, and this is not just because they were so invested in the fight for women's rights and the suffrage movement, but also because they were idealistic. They wanted to change the world, and they lived in this society where women couldn't do the things that we can do today. They didn't have the rights and the privileges that we have now. Their life was a lot more restricted by the men that ruled them. So that's husbands, fathers, community leaders, the lawmakers, the government, all of those sorts of things. So they couldn't just do whatever they wanted, and they were still quite bound by societal expectation as well, and duty to their families. So they kind of really had to find that balance between what they wanted to do, which was make lives better for women and children particularly, but for all vulnerable people, and find a way to live a life that was fulfilling and authentic at the same time. And it was that struggle to move through the messiness that life can be when your dreams are kind of shattered, and find a way to pick up the pieces, regroup with that fire still burning intact, and live a normal, authentic life, and still keep going and doing the things that you want to do, make those wonderful changes, and do what's right for people. And I think that's a universal kind of concept, really, that we all have to find a way to live lives that are authentic to ourselves, while doing what's passionate to us, doing what's really in our heart, and perhaps then doing what's right for us and for other people. And that's not always an easy balance, I don't think.
No, I'd agree with you. Definitely agree with that sentiment. For me, if I hear the word courage, for so often, or so long, should I say, the next word that comes to mind always is sacrifice. I always feel like, or have felt in the past, that courage means having, the courage to sacrifice to achieve an outcome that's desirable or maybe necessary, that or maybe an outcome that doesn't involve your own happiness. But more and more, and as you mentioned, it encourages also the ability to navigate through the world we're in and being true to yourself, while also, being true to the life you have to live, and perhaps chasing those things you really like to do. I think my concept of courage is slowly changing, because although I know sacrifices most definitely will still play a part depending on the circumstances, but the navigating day-to-day life, as we discover more and more that a lot of the world's upside down and there are no adults in charge, it's I'm wondering if the concept of sacrifice is changing as well when it comes to courage, and especially with the themes that you touch on, or at least that are present in all your books, and that is that backdrop of war or turmoil. Do you think as we move into 2024, 2025, do you think courage will be shown by the people of the countries, and maybe we won't just easily sacrifice things to jump and be puppets for governments?
Yeah, I really would like to think that that's true, and I think history does repeat itself, most definitely. But I guess the thing that's different in this day and age now compared to the times when I've written my books is that women do, in a lot of the world, not everywhere, of course, we do have a lot more privilege. We do have more ability to say what we think and make change and have control over our lives.
Mm-hmm.
We have, we're able to vote. We're a lot more equal to men in society. So we have come an awfully long way, but certainly we've got a long way to go yet. But I think sacrifice that women would have had to sacrifice back in those days was quite different to the way women have to sacrifice now. I really do think the biggest challenge for a woman these days is to, as you mentioned, be true to herself and sacrifice, well, really it comes down to priorities, doesn't it? When you marry and have children, your children become your priority above other things that you might be very passionate about. But then again, there might be some overarching, really important thing that you stay true to, like maybe the way women live in your society, wherever it is in the world, and women's rights. They might be really important and come first above everything else. So I think rather than use the word sacrifice, I'm hoping that as we move into the next couple of years and beyond, that we can use the word priority and change our priorities as wherever we are in that point in time of our life, and the experiences and the situations and circumstances around us change, and that we can, perhaps navigate through all of those things and still be true to ourselves and the things that are important to us.
Yeah, like you said, priorities. And I think the ability to, we can't always choose, but the ability to at least sometimes choose priorities rather than having them dictated or forced upon us. And, reading up a little bit about your work and your books and the themes, and obviously the title, Woman of Courage. Look, for me, obviously, that's a difficult lens to look through because I am a man. So, but also, I don't feel I've come across, growing up, I've never felt that division between man and woman as far as power and that sort of stuff. Although I am aware that does exist, and there are still many issues to be resolved even today. But I didn't really come across it. A lot of powerful figures in my life have been women, and still are. I just wasn't that kind of person to say it. Saying that, I was reading a discussion not long ago, and someone mentioned, what's the craziest thing about dating someone crazy, basically, and the guy would say, whatever, or getting stalked, or getting endless phone calls. But then one of the ladies said, well, no, for a woman, the risk is getting murdered, because because of that strength, difference of strength. And that sort of that kind of solidified a few things. I was like, yeah, wow. How would I feel if I was walking in a world where every other person was twice my size and could snap me in half? And, I was like, okay. And then thinking about, when you're talking about these strong female characters and women in throughout history and pivotal moments of history, the trials and tribulations they have to go through, there really is just a whole lot of levels, isn't there? Just the fact that being a woman, that's the challenge number one.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and as you said, of course, it's easy to always hear the stories, the soldier stories and the politician stories, and of course, that's always what's being written. But I can definitely see that there are, countless stories from the female side of things that are just it may even be more epic based on what they had to navigate.
And that's a really good way of looking at it, actually. I guess as a woman, you grow up, you know that there's danger out there. You don't go walking by yourself in dark places because you know what the dangers are. Domestic violence is everywhere, through now and in the past. I think there are some men that feel entitled to lash out against a woman because she is, as they say, weaker. She's not weaker, but physically there is a difference, most definitely. That's just a basic, fundamental way that a woman does grow up. I think this next generation, that my daughter, I think perhaps feels a bit differently about this and thinks a bit differently about this too, that she hasn't grown up in maybe surrounded by those kind of elements and that fear. And she doesn't see it as much. And so she's a lot, I wouldn't say naive, but I think she's aware, but she feels that she has strength within her to deal with this. And maybe she's got a bit more street sense as well, compared to how I was at that same age. I think women of the future will be a lot more savvy, and they are strong, and they are aware of where they sit in the world and what their rights are. And that's certainly, a first world and Western world thing. Certainly in a lot of countries, there are women that are still just as disempowered as the women in my stories, even in the Victorian era, and even worse. So we're really, really fortunate here to be able to tell the stories of women, to bring light to the situations of women, when there are so many women out there still that really are struggling in very difficult circumstances.
Yes, and the only one of the bright lights, I think, is that the digital world and the digital communication, I think, to a pretty strong degree, is very much an equalizer. And the digital technology, the jobs that it can offer, the voices that it can give. I think that there's there's a lot easier for people to come together, and of course there's strength in numbers. There's also not the sharing of knowledge, the building upon knowledge and work of others. So yes, hopefully brighter days ahead. But obviously, look, your books do touch on powerful themes. Philosophical question now. I'm wondering if it's a fair question to ask how the writing of each book has changed you as a person. Do you find that when you finish a book, you've grown in a way that you weren't expecting?
I've had this interesting conversation with my sister-in-law actually about the writing of each of my books. And a lot of them are a coming of age story of young women growing into womanhood. But I guess for me, the first two books were learning a bit more about my family and being in touch with what their situation was like. But by the time I've gotten to this one, The Woman of Courage, it's about women speaking up about what they need. And certainly I've been guilty over my younger years of not always speaking up about what I need. And I guess this is a good reflection on what I also need to do, and that I am also changing as a person. I've got teenage children now, and I feel like I've sort of come back to myself after being a mother for many years and found pieces of myself again. And I'm beginning to speak up about what I need, what I think, and create a life, outside of motherhood for myself as well. So that is really a sense of being courageous and stepping out into that life, and as a writer, and doing all the things that being a writer is involved, and speaking up about what I need. And that was really quite an interesting conversation, that she made me aware that often I'm at that place that my characters are at when I'm in the writing process. For some reason, I'm able to touch on the stage that I'm possibly at, and sort of really channel that through my writing as well.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I really liked what you said there, that, now that your children are teenagers, but you said that you're finding pieces of yourself again, and and with each piece you're finding reason to voice what you need, what you want. And so in a way that's answering that question of what courage is, and what you're willing to do to fight for what's right. It sounds like by finding the pieces and finding strength within yourself, you're more in control now. Would that be a fair observation?
Yeah, that would be a fair observation, absolutely. And with that goes confidence to step out and take control. Yeah.
Excellent. Now, with regards to the protagonists of your stories, what character do you think you've resonated with most?
I would have originally have thought Hannah, but the more I've thought about that, because Hannah's such a wonderful, strong character, and she has a real arc of development through the story as a young, idealistic woman to, a woman with wisdom towards the end of the story. And I guess I was perhaps like that at some point too. But I guess when I thought about it a bit more, I wrote the wonderful characters of Clementine and Esther. They're Hannah's best friends in the story. I really resonated with Esther in the story. So she's a young woman who has a lot of societal expectation around her. She's kind of landed gentry, so she's pretty naive about the world. She knows that she's, not meant to do all the things that she loves in her heart. She loves science and technology. She's passionate about engineering and inventions. She wants to be an inventor. So she navigates this process over time, from her position of not being able to voice what she wants, to being able to begin to build a career around being an inventor and being in local government even, and voicing the needs of other people. And I really resonated with her because it follows my arc, I suppose, from a physiotherapist and a mother, to voicing what was deep in my heart and in my bones, that I wanted to become a writer, and then actually going out into the world and making that happen, and having that confidence that we just talked about a minute ago to get out there and make it real and make it happen. And I guess that's why I really resonated with Esther.
Oh, beautiful. And sticking on the theme of characters, if you were to write a novel featuring your very self as the protagonist, what era or setting would you choose? And what challenges do you think you'd set for yourself in the book?
There are two different eras that I really love, but maybe I would gravitate a bit more to the 20s and 30s. I love that interwar period. I think that's a really fascinating era. And I love the whole flapper thing with the beautiful 1920s dresses and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that's perhaps the era that I would gravitate towards. What was the other thing?
Oh, what challenges plot-wise, what challenges do you think you'd set yourself as a character?
Well, I would love to be, an action heroine who has a life of adventure. That would be very cool, I think. So the challenges would be just being an ordinary person, maybe, a mother as I am, or just someone who doesn't think outside the square of what's put in front of them with societal expectation, which is always which is always a theme, I think, and going outside of the box, stepping outside the square, and living a life of adventure and exploration. And yeah, I think that would be the challenge.
Oh, I think I can see the book already. It could be Cotton Club Dancer by day, crime fighter by night.
I love it. That sounds awesome.
There we go. Taking down all the what is it, the mob and
Yep.
all the moonshine rackets. And,
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
perfect. Now, when it comes to all of your books that you've written so far, because obviously there's a lot more to come. Now, for book lovers out there that are going to want to dive into your collection and start reading some of your books, be whisked away to these different times, discover these powerful women in different pivotal moments of history. Is there a suggestion for readers to start in a particular order or start a particular book, or really is each title standalone?
Yeah, look, each title I've written deliberately to be standalone, so that they don't have to be read in any particular order. Of course, with A Girl from Munich and Suitcase of Dreams, those two books do work well together because the story follows on, but you can also read them quite separately, and you can even read Suitcase of Dreams before The Girl from Munich. So they are all standalone. So that there can be read any order.
Is it really true that there's already talk of a sequel for A Woman of Courage?
Yes, there is indeed. Originally, this was going to be one big story covering the suffrage movement for women's the vote for women, which takes us up to past World War One. But there was so much to write about that I had to split the story. So the second half of the story, or the sequel, and again, this next novel will also be standalone, covers Hannah's journey from the early 1900s through to the rise of the suffragettes. So we all know about the famous suffragettes and the militant action and the famous Pankhursts. So we're going to follow Hannah through this stage of the suffragettes and how they fight for the vote for women, and also to World War One. So I'm really excited to be back into a war story. I loved World War II, and I'm really excited to write lots about World War One and all the fascinating changes that happened to women. And on the home front at this time was a real catalyst for lots of change, and that's why I think I love writing about war stories. And then it brings us all the way to the end of World War One and to when the vote for women finally happens in Britain.
Wow, so you haven't really you've set yourself up a nice relaxing time, haven't you? Because it sounds as though you may be absent from a few Christmas parties this year. You'll be busy typing away.
I think I will be, yes. Unfortunately, I need to get this finished because we're hoping to have this published and out into the world this time next year.
Oh, wow, that is very fast turnaround, especially for something of that scope.
Yes. I think I'm lucky that I've already got the world built and the characters are formed already. So that's a really good start, and I know where the story is going. So that's fortunate. I don't need perhaps quite as much time.
And that just on the sideline, what is your writing method like? Have you got a regimented schedule, or, for example, to work on the sequel, is it going to be whenever you can, or do you have a certain amount of words per week? How do you approach a task like that?
Well, I'm really fortunate that I'm able to write full time, and I know a lot of people out there don't have that flexibility to do that. So I'm really fortunate. So I pretty well treat it like a job. I work 4 to 5 days a week writing. Say up until recently, my youngest son has just finished year 12. So that's New South Wales HSC. So up until recently, it was always up at 8. And I start writing then and work through the day. For 4 days a week, Friday mornings, I leave for my yoga class, which is a wonderful way to stretch and relax after sitting for long periods. And then, look, if I'm running close to a deadline, obviously there's extra work as well, sort of on the weekends. And yes, I do work to a word limit, depending on the time that I have leading up to my deadline. If I have the full amount of time that I normally have, I will write somewhere around 7,000 words a week, and that's over a course of 4 or 5 days. And I would work right through that first draft and then go back and edit my second draft and add things in like interesting research that I've discovered, or build my scenes a lot better with the 5 senses, for example, and just make the connections between the characters and their arc of development a lot richer as well. And so the drafts kind of, build from that order. So maybe we'll do 3 or 4 drafts, hopefully before I would get it to the publisher, and then we work on it further from there.
And when you say word limit, do you have a cap and don't go? Is that what you mean? Like you don't let yourself write more than a certain amount in a day so that you start stretching it out, or word limit as in you don't stop until you reach a particular word count?
Yeah, I don't stop until I reach that particular word
Gotcha.
count. The danger for me is I will be writing something and think, I don't know much about that. I need to go and research. So I'll get the research happening, and then I'm off down the rabbit hole. And then I can maybe have done 500 words at the end of the day because of all the research I've done, which is never great. So it is more a case of trying to reach that word limit. And look, by good luck, if I actually reach that word limit and I'm still writing, I will keep going until I feel that it's time to stop that day. And generally I'll work kind of to sort of lunchtime, which when my energy flags a bit by that point, and then I'll go off and do emails or cook dinner or whatever it is that I need to do through the day, and then come back sort of mid-afternoon. And if all goes to plan and I'm not taxi driving, picking kids up from the station or from school or whatever, and dinner is already done, I like to work through, say, mid-afternoon through till about 7 or 8 at night. And that's another really great creative burst at that time for me as well. So and that's generally how I would work. And if I've gone past the word limit for the day or for the week, I would just keep going until I've kind of got to the end of that creative burst.
Yeah. And I'm guessing you don't sneakily let those extra words count towards the next day's volume, do you?
No.
No, that sounds like...
You know that you're always going to be behind at some point anyway, down that research rabbit hole. So, that's good to use to catch up, most definitely.
Yeah, and it sounds like an absolute dream. It must be, pinch yourself so good to wake up and know that your job is to sit down and dive into these worlds and get these characters and events on paper.
I do pinch myself every day because it really is a dream come true. And I know there are a lot of people out there not as fortunate to be able to do this as their day job as well. They actually have a day job and then fit this in on the side, which I'd imagine would be a lot more difficult.
But hopefully for so many people out there, not only will it be difficult, it may only be temporary. And then eventually they too can be writing full time.
Yes.
Now, we were talking a little bit prior to me hitting the old proverbial red record button, and it sounds like you have a lot happening with regards to, promoting A Woman of Courage. So what does the finish of 2023 look like for you with regards to your book release?
Well, I've already been out on book tour last week, which was wonderful. So I was up in Brisbane doing some events and some book signings at the bookstores. And in Melbourne and here in Sydney as well. I've started events here. I'm back home in Sydney now, but back off to Melbourne on Thursday for some more events. And then there will be some more events around Sydney next week and book signings in bookstores. So I guess probably over the next 2 or 3 weeks, things will still be really busy promoting A Woman of Courage, which is great. I think once you get into the flow, you just roll forward, and it feels good to talk about the book regularly. And then I guess I'll be back to finishing off my draft for the next book, which is An Undeniable Voice.
So it's got a title.
It does have a title, yes. So that will be back to the publisher before Christmas. And then, I guess we all get to take a bit of a breather then.
Well, that's when you start working on your the Cotton Club superhero story. So if you did write that book and you were to have a bit of a super or a special power that comes at night when you're exacting vengeance upon the world, what would your superpower be?
Oh, I love it. Oh, what would my superpower be? I don't know. I think I really love I love Wonder Woman, actually. I think she's pretty cool. So if I could have a special whip that wrapped around people and they told the truth, I think that would be pretty cool. But also, I think to fly through the air would be pretty awesome, to get from A to B without having to worry about a car or train or walk or anything else. You could just get there in an instant. That sounds pretty good to me.
Absolutely. Now, I'm far from a professional or expert on fashion of the 20s and 30s, but I suspect if you were a Cotton Club dancer come superhero, maybe the tassels in your costume as you're flying, they can shoot down and they zap criminals. And it makes them drop to their knees and say sorry and then tell the truth.
Oh, that sounds incredible. I love that idea. That's very cool.
Yeah. Well, I think that should be a comic book, though. You'll have to get work on a comic book.
I think it might have to be, hey.
Absolutely. Tania, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me, and thank you so much for sharing all of the wonderful insights into the inspiration behind your work, the tales that you've been telling in the books, the inspiration you've got from your family, and just insights into your life and your writing style, and with all of our listeners. And thank you so much for coming on the show to talk about your brand new book, A Woman of Courage, which is out now. And where can they find that?
Look, in all good bookstores, and also on all good online bookstores as well. Yep, and any information that they need to find to buy the books, they can hop onto my website as well, and also my social media, so Facebook and Instagram.
Excellent. That was my next question. When it comes to the website, where people can follow what you're doing, read your blogs, see what your events are, what is the website where they can follow you?
Yeah, www.taniablanchard.com.au.
Nice, easy one there.
Yeah, really easy.
Nothing cryptic, but no. Tania, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. It's been fascinating to talk with you. Look, I think I'm being turned around into the direction of historical fiction, even though technically I'm a horror sci-fi guy. I honestly am starting to really see the magic that can be found in historical fiction. And there's one thing that I know, it's when I talk to authors who write historical fiction, they are passionate, and you have definitely kept that truth and enhanced it tenfold, because your passion for history and historical fiction is just bursting out. So thank you so much, and I do hope that maybe early next year you'll be kind enough to join us for a writer's lounge where we can kick back and have a quiet drink and hear about some of the adventures you've had on your book tours and getting the sequel done.
That sounds absolutely wonderful, Darren. Thank you so much for having me. And look, it really makes me so happy to hear that you might be going down the direction of historical fiction now. And that's wonderful. Thank you so very much.
No problems at all. All the best, Tania.
Thanks, Darren.
Thank you to Tania Blanchard. That was an absolutely amazing interview. And thank you to our fabulous friend Darren Kasenkow for teasing all of those things out. And dare I just say, next interview, we'll have the delightful Laurie Bell teasing out.
My first one. My first one.
Brilliant job with Les Zig. So, but anyway, we're talking about Tania, and I've got here love, lost hope, finest moment in history, started writing for her children. Just But she started as a fantasy author, and then she
Yes.
moved to historical fiction. What was she
And
thinking?
it was particularly grandparents and history. It's fascinating
Yeah.
to think about that so much happened with our grandparents' generation, but it wasn't that long ago. It
No,
was
this is
really
true.
only 60, 70 years.
Yeah.
And they were in World War II, the things, the other viruses that were going around in the like just imagining that the past is not that far
Yeah.
in the past, really.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
just really reminds you, just even in the space of 50 years, things
Yes.
have changed
Yeah.
so dramatically.
Yeah.
But also that, of course, the past is not always that far away.
Yep.
I have to admit, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was one of my favorite stories, as
Yes.
was The Faraway Tree. So
Yes.
I really
Yes.
enjoyed that. And what I found fascinating with Tania is I write in a very similar way to Tania. So I was really, yep, I totally get that. I totally get that, with starting with that first draft and then layering with each successive draft after that, and doing my best to write to a word count per week or per day or whatever, just to keep yourself going. And you start with 100 words and the next minute you've got your 90,000. It doesn't take as long as you think.
No. And the danger, of course, is when you end up with 190,000, you think, right, that's perhaps a little bit too much for people to read. Let's cut that back down. Yes.
And then you end up adding more.
I am the worst editor. I think, right, I've got to get rid of 10,000, and I end up with another 5. I think, that didn't work.
Yeah. So that was fascinating. And also listening to her talking about the commercial fiction masterclass.
Yes. Yeah.
And having the ideas that come up from that, with writing to a word limit each day, finishing the first draft, which is the first goal with any kind of book writing. Oh my God, you are totally trashing my edit. Wow, that is so hurtful. That's all I can see at the moment. It's I'm gonna have I really, if I can,
Yes.
Oh, look at that. Look.
Oh,
Unbelievable.
Oh,
Yeah. So that is
everyone's a critic.
Yeah. I am on my second edit of one of my books at the moment.
Yes.
And very similar to Tanya, I'm layering at the moment. And yeah, we'll have to talk about second drafts at some point to really break that down. But it is a fascinating process that you go through with each draft that you edit. So
yeah, I think we will do that. Let's put that on, because you and I have some things to say about writing, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Write draft one without editing it is, treat it like a business, which is really important.
Yes.
And while we've had the international survey that you just mentioned, if you don't treat it like a business, you're not even going to get close to that, that 18,000. Women have come a long way. Be true to yourself. Choose your priorities. Now, talking about priorities. Yeah, go on.
Oh, I was going to say that reminded me of our writers' workshop the other week with our lovely chat about how women's stories are often untold. So we hear so many stories of men's version of history and what they were doing, but what were the women doing? It is a sort of a hole in that historic fiction area that probably comes through more in romance history fiction, but in your dramatic thrillers and that you probably don't see it as often, which would be an amazing thing to publicize more. If there are more of those books out there, let us know. Yes,
and we've got a tremendous crew of female crime writers in Australia, and Sisters in Crime, they do some really good work. So they're bringing up, but history is written by the victors, as we know. For example, here we are still in National Reconciliation Week, and history that didn't recognize the Australian wars that went on is there. Fun fact, in the program that I was doing for work, the word priority, in fact, was first seen in the 14th century and originally had no plural, because of course you can have only one priority, which is the thing at the fore or the thing that's most important. But in the mid-20th century, the corporations decided there would be more than one priority. So now, we've got 30, but naturally,
we have priority lists.
Yes,
now.
and that doesn't make any sense when you think about the word, because you can only have one priority. So anyway,
See, word
just say a
usage.
list of
Interesting.
important things. Yeah, and it was just fascinating. Yeah, I don't know whether it fascinated the group that I was teaching, but that's okay. Tell
We love
females, tell female stories, speaking up about what you need. Yeah, and yeah, I think Darren's given her some ideas for new books, which is
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yes.
Oh, I miss myself to
Ideas are
death.
everywhere, aren't they?
Ideas are everywhere. And really, the people that have the courage to write those stories is one group. And then the people
Yeah.
that have the courage to put them out there is the next group.
Yes.
And then to really go, you know what, this is what I want to do, is another whole group altogether. So, yeah, let's just say that Australian Book Clubs, we love anybody in any of those groups, but we really encourage you, publish your stories, get them edited,
Yes.
write them down, share them
Yes.
with your family, then start to share them with more and get them out there. So thank you again to Tania Blanchard for a great conversation with our lovely but now absent Darren Kasenkow, but we will get him back. Thank you, Darren.
Yes.
Yeah, and of course now let me just show you, being cat people, that she wants to go out.
Of course she does. Wait.
So I'll just let her out. Just excuse me a moment. Just chat amongst yourselves. Laurie,
I will continue to show everyone the trash that is becoming my. Oh, we're now on to Christmas bags, apparently, with our little attacks. So thank you so much, little one. That's brilliant. That's lovely. Have some cleaning work to do when we finish up today, I think.
Oh, well, you know, I love cats, but they are very immediate. Thank you, human. You can just, you know, do what I need you to do now.
Yes. Yes, of course. Yes. Yes, boss.
Yes. Have you got a quote for us, Laurie?
I do, actually.
Excellent.
So I've got a quote from the lovely Jodie Picoult, which is, "You may not write well every day, but you can always edit a bad page. You can't edit a blank page."
Yes.
Which is absolutely spot on, and follows on from Tania's chat, actually. If you don't get the words down, you can't edit them. So you need to finish the first draft.
Yes, most definitely, which is good. Get that first draft out.
Yes.
And I've got the role, this is from Anais Nin, the role of a writer is not to say what we can all say, but what we are unable to say.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's good. I quite like that one.
Although sometimes with my writing, it is quite often what I cannot say is what I cannot say. Every now and then you find that lovely little phrase of write this.
Yes.
Yeah. As you go through, it's like, write this, because I haven't done it yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Or I put needs more here.
Yep. Add more.
Yes,
yeah.
yes,
All the way through. Yeah, absolutely. I put them in little square brackets. In my work, as I type it up. I'm like, this needs more.
Yeah.
Useful. Thank you, me.
Thank you, past Laurie. Yes. Future Laurie appreciates your efforts. Not. But there you go. But I do love that you can see all your books around you. That's very good.
Yes, I had to play with putting them out so that I could see them. I can only see some of them though. But no, there's more of them. Yeah. I do need to get working on my second draft.
Yes. Well, we are just about caught up, because this is Darren's last interview, and we've got a fabulous interview that you've done with the lovely Les Zeke, which was a bit of fun
to talk to. Absolutely.
Yeah. Brilliant. So we are about to start on that. We've got a writer's room planned. We're trying to get Rachel. We'll get some time with her at Rachel Matthews, and we'll get that happening. And lots more to happen.
And I suppose if anyone's got any really interesting topics that they want to hear more about, please let us know.
Yes.
Email us and let us know, so that we can do some work for you, so to speak.
We can dive into the research and find out and see if there's anybody that we can bring on who might be an expert in that area, and share their knowledge with everybody else, which is good.
Sounds wonderful.
But I have a review of Mullumbimby by Melissa Lukashenko. He's a brilliant Aboriginal writer, and I've read a number of her books, which are just great, love her work. And she, of course, has done lots of work in the literary field as well. So follow your Australian writers. And, this week, just think a bit of a shout out to our Indigenous writers. There are so many wonderful Indigenous writers who write, all genres. And we've interviewed a number of them on the show, a number of them on the podcast. We've got a number of them in the library, and even those that we don't have that are still out there. And I know Anita Heiss is doing great work out there writing beautiful books. She is going gangbusters, which is fantastic. So I follow her as well. So thank you, Anita, for doing even more, for writing and bringing the Aboriginal languages and stories to us as forward. Well. Yep.
Beautiful.
That's it for episode 109. We'll be back for episode 110. Could be Les, or it could be the writers' room. We'll see if we can get organised. But thank you, everybody, for listening. Don't forget to follow us on the socials, and please, be kind and buy an Australian author, buy their book, or listen to it from the library,
or even tell someone about books that you're any books. Tell someone what you're reading and how fascinating it is and what you're loving about it. And pass it forward. Chat to people and
pass it forward.
If you have the opportunity and want to write a review, please do. We all value reviews online, and it does help us get a little bit of a boost. So talk about us, tell people. It's lovely.
Yeah, it is. And so we have a reminder for you, of course. And the reminder is that read more Aussie books. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for listening. Everyone. And we will talk to you next time. Bye for now.
Bye for now.
Mullumbimby by Melissa Lukashenko. I haven't been this moved by a book for a while. This is a brilliant story and beautifully told. Kate Grenville described it best: cheeky, thoughtful, real, a powerful novel about country and belonging. It had me grabbed from the first page. The story galloped along, and then, no spoilers, an unexpected event threw me. I had to put it down for a while. I was so sad and then cranky. Take it back. I know it's only a story, but the sense of Jo finding her belonging and steering her way through the mire of her inner and outer worlds was reminiscent of women's journeys everywhere. But the connection to country is unique. This ignorant do-guy, thanks Melissa for the education, makes me want to go find the women who've come before me. Great story. Australian Book Lovers acknowledges First Nations peoples and recognises their continuous connection to country, community and to culture. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and honour the sharing of traditional stories passed down through generations. We're committed to a safe and inclusive welcome for authors and readers of all cultures and backgrounds, including people of LGBTQIA+ communities and their families.
Let's meet again, where magic happens.